What'd you see?
It was like a big creature.
A big creature?
Yeah, like around 10 feet tall.
I'm not going to BS you guys. One of my partners said they saw something fall out of the sky too.
From secret investigations to eyewitness accounts, these are some of the wildest UFO sightings and government projects in history. The Kecksburg incident took place on December 9th, 1965, and it's often referred to as Pennsylvania's Roswell. On that evening, a bright fireball was spotted across 6 US states and even parts of Canada, particularly over Detroit and Windsor. Witnesses reported seeing a large object streak through the sky, creating sonic booms and even causing some grass fires in Michigan and northern Ohio. In Kecksburg, about 30 miles southeast of Pittsburgh, locals described hearing a thump and seeing blue smoke. The US Army and state police sealed off the area where the object was believed to have landed, but when search teams arrived, they apparently found nothing. Authorities claimed that it was likely just a meteor, but decades later in 2005, NASA released a statement saying that fragments from the area had been analyzed and came from a Soviet satellite. They also said that the records detailing this had been lost in 1987. The whole thing just felt very fishy. Was the object an extraterrestrial craft, debris from a Soviet space probe, a military satellite? Till this day, we still don't know. On June 21st, 1947, Harold Dahl, a harbor patrolman, claimed he saw 6 donut-shaped craft hovering over Maury Island, Washington. According to Dahl, one of these craft began releasing debris that resembled light metal, which he said caused injuries to his dog and a crew member. A man named Kenneth Arnold heard about the story, and having just recently reported seeing unidentified flying objects himself, he was pretty interested in the case. Arnold interviewed Dahl and his fellow crew member Fred Chrisman. They showed him fragments of what they said came from this UFO. The US Air Force flew in to investigate, but then their plane mysteriously crashed, killing both the officers inside. Then the FBI concluded that the sighting had been a hoax. Dahl himself allegedly told investigators that if questioned, he would claim it was all made up to avoid any trouble. Edward Ruppelt, the head of Project Blue Book, later characterized the Maury Island incident as the dirtiest hoax in UFO history. But was it just a hoax? Some think that the hoax explanation may have been a cover-up to distract from something bigger, like military operations or technology that the government wanted to keep secret. On the night of March 24th, 1967, something happened at Malmstrom Air Force Base in Montana. Robert Salas, a then 26-year-old US Air Force lieutenant, was in a secure underground launch control center overseeing 10 Minutemen intercontinental ballistic missiles when everything went dark. Just before the missile systems failed, a security officer on the surface frantically called Salas, saying that there was a glowing oval-shaped object hovering above the base. Apparently the object exhibited strange movements. It had stopped suddenly and made sharp turns that no aircraft at the time would have been capable of making. Salas felt that they were under attack, but not by any known threat. I mean, what type of technology could have disabled the missiles? Within 10 seconds, all 10 missiles had just disabled at the same time. This had never happened before. After the incident, Salas was instructed not to discuss what happened and signed a non-disclosure agreement. For decades, he kept quiet, but in the mid-90s, he started sharing this story. He later discovered that just 8 days prior to his experience, another similar incident had occurred at Minnow Air Force Base in North Dakota, where 10 more missiles were disabled. Salas estimates that within a 6-month span, a total of 30 nuclear missiles were affected. Official Air Force documents declassified in 1996 confirmed these events at Malmstrom. One of the most talked about topics in recent years is the Navy's released UFO videos. In December of 2017, the New York Times revealed 3 videos recorded by US Navy pilots that were encounters with mysterious flying objects. The videos, named FLIR-1, Gimbal, and Go Fast, were filmed during training exercises off the coast of San Diego and East Coast. The footage showed UAPs moving at incredible speeds, performing all these maneuvers that didn't look like any known aircraft. The objects appeared to be flying against the wind, changing direction instantly, and looked to have no visible propulsion. The Navy pilots used advanced infrared cameras capturing the heat signatures of these objects. In the gimbal video, you can even hear how amazed and shocked the pilots are. In 2019, the Pentagon officially released these videos, confirming they were authentic, and stated that they were part of a larger program to investigate UAPs. The US Department of Defense established the Unidentified Aerial Phenomenon Task Force to assess these encounters and any potential threats they might pose to national security. What's fascinating is that some military personnel, including former Navy pilot David Fravor, have come forward describing their experiences with these UAPs, saying that these encounters are still unexplained. The Belgian UFO waves spanned from November of 1989 to April of 1990. It all started on November 29th, 1989, with reports of large, triangular objects flying at low altitudes across Belgium. A lot of the witnesses described these crafts as having lights underneath. On the night of March 30th to the 31st of 1990, the Control Reporting Center in the village of Glans received reports of unusual lights moving through the sky. In response, 2 fighter jets were sent to investigate. The pilots were able to get radar locks on targets, but they reported seeing nothing unusual. Over the following weeks, 143 people or so reported seeing something in the sky that night, but all these accounts came in after the fact. Eyewitnesses claimed to see 4 lights in a square formation making erratic movements before disappearing. Some believe the Belgian UFO wave case was a genuine UFO. Others think that this could be a case of mass hysteria, but what do you all think?
Number 10. Recent sighting. Middletown was shaken by an extraordinary event last month as residents reported witnessing a display of rotating green lights hovering above them. The inexplicable sighting, which occurred around 10:30 p.m., left many in awe and pondering the possibility of extraterrestrial activity. One individual, Caden Little, managed to capture the event on video while on Jerry Couch Boulevard. Caden described his initial reaction as a mix of fear and fascination, exclaiming, "I instantly thought like we're under attack by aliens. It was scary." Fortunately, the lights abruptly disappeared without any hostile action, providing some relief. Eyewitnesses, including Bryce Garrick, observed the lights rotating in a clockwise motion before swiftly darting across the sky and vanishing. The bewildering speed at which the lights maneuvered ruled out the possibility of drones, according to Brian Simpson, president of the Cincinnati Astronomical Society. So what was it? Who knows, but my bet is aliens. Number 9. The coin incident. At 7:30 p.m. on October 18, 1973, American Airlines Flight 21 encountered a UFO near Mansfield, Ohio, and reported it. This would be the first of dozens of sightings reported in the area that night. However, the most astonishing one took place 3 hours later and became known as the coin incident. Sometime after 10:30 p.m., an Army Reserve helicopter piloted by Captain Lawrence Coyne and a crew of 3 men was flying from Columbus to Cleveland when, somewhere around Mansfield, they noticed a red light on the horizon. They then realized that the object was heading straight for them at a high rate of speed. Coyne quickly descended to avoid collision, but as the men were preparing for impact, the object came to a halt in front of them and projected a green, pyramid-shaped beam over the helicopter. At the same time this was happening, the men reported the helicopter being pulled up and towards the UFO. However, it then let go and darted out of sight. The incident lasted 5 minutes. The men described a gray, metallic-looking dome-shaped object with a red light on one end and white light on the other. Now, interestingly, after the incident, according to one crew member, the helicopter never worked right again. Now, this whole incident was seen from the ground by a mother and her 2 children who pulled their car over to watch what was going on. They reported seeing the helicopter chasing an object that they said looked like blimp, pear-shaped, and as big as a school bus. Number 8. Earliest photographs. A photo taken in St. Paris, Champaign County in 1932 is considered one of the earliest possible photographs of a UFO ever recorded. It shows George Sutton, a local resident, and what appears to be a classic UFO-shaped object over his left shoulder. Skeptics say the object is simply a street lamp, but according to the folklore that surrounds this image, there were no electric streetlights along this road in 1932, nor are any wires or poles visible in the image. Now, this photo is intriguing because it predates the flying saucer cancer craze of the late 1940s and 50s. It was taken before the alleged Roswell UFO crash in 1947, and it was 6 years prior to the broadcast of the War of the Worlds in 1938, when some people believed aliens were attacking Earth. In other words, the person who took this photograph either captured a street lamp, a real UFO, or was way ahead of the curve in terms of pulling off a good hoax. But I'd like to think it's a real UFO. Number 7. The Carnival. As a way to raise money, Father Gregory Miller decided to host a carnival in August of 1949. The church sought help from Sergeant Donald R. Berger, and on the first night of the carnival, sometime after 8 p.m., he was operating the searchlight when it came upon a massive object in the sky. His log states the object was stationary, appearing as a glowing disc. When I moved the searchlight away, the disc continued to glow. He estimated the object to be around 25,000 feet high and reported that the sky was clear with a thin haze at altitude. More than 100 people saw the object that night, including Father Miller. Maybe nothing more would have come from this incident, but the next day, local newspapers carried stories about strange lights being reported all over Cincinnati, not just at the carnival. At least 3 major newspapers in the area ran stories about the sightings, so it definitely was something. Number 6. 86-mile police chase. In Portage County in 1966, law enforcement officers from several jurisdictions either witnessed or chased a UFO for 86 miles into Pennsylvania. The incident is considered one of the most thoroughly documented UFO cases on record. Portage County Sheriff Deputy Dale Spar and second deputy named Wilbur Neff came upon the UFO around 5:30 a.m. on April 17th. They were investigating an abandoned vehicle and they heard a humming or buzzing noise behind them, and they turned to see a UFO hovering just above a nearby tree line. A bright cone-shaped light came from beneath the object, illuminating the ground. They called into dispatch, which told them to keep an eye on the object. Just then, the object began to quickly move away. The two decided to give chase, and near the state line, a local police officer saw the object, followed by Spar and Neff chasing it. He decided to join in on the action. However, a short time later, just as the sun was rising, Spar began to run out of gas, so he and Neff and the local police officer pulled into a gas station, where they watched the object ascend several thousand feet into the sky and then straight into outer space, and, well, that was that. Coming in at number 10 is Antonio Vilas-Boas. On the night of October 16, 1957, Antonio Vilas-Boas was plowing fields when he saw what he described as a red star in the night sky that approached him, growing in size. The craft began descending to land in the field, and he decided to leave on his tractor, but its lights and engine died, so he decided to continue on foot. However, he was seized by a 5-foot-tall humanoid who was wearing gray coveralls and a helmet. Its eyes were small and blue, and instead of speech it made noises like barks or yelps. 3 similar beings then joined and dragged him inside their aircraft. Once inside the craft, Antonio said he was stripped of his clothes and covered from head to toe with a strange gel. He was then led to a large semicircular room through a doorway that had strange red symbols written over it. They then took blood from him and took him to a third room where some kind of gas was pumped into the room, which made him violently ill. Shortly after this, Antonio was joined in the room by another humanoid. This one, however, was female, very attractive. Antonio was then given back his clothing and taken on a tour of the ship by the humanoids. He was then escorted off the ship and watched as it took off, glowing brightly. When he returned home, he discovered that only 4 hours had passed. Now, did he help create one of the first alien-human hybrids? I think so. Number 9. Elizabeth Klarer. Elizabeth Klarer was a South African woman who, starting in 1956, publicly claimed to have been contacted by aliens multiple times between 1954 and 1963. Her first visitation supposedly occurred when she was just 7 years old, and she was one of the first women to claim with an extraterrestrial. She promoted an idea of a better world and beliefs in a cosmic consciousness. In her book Beyond the Light Barrier, she strived to convey a message of peace, love, understanding, and environmentalism, which she credited to the superior wisdom of an advanced and immaculately utopian Venusian civilization. She also ended up promoting conspiracy theories of an international cover-up that kept vital information from the public, and claimed to have been threatened with abduction to press her to revealing details about alien technology. Number 8. Terrell Copeland. The Virginia pilot Terrell Copeland claimed that he was abducted by aliens, particularly because he was a Marine. Terrell claimed that his first experience with aliens occurred in 2007 when he captured footage of what he believed to be a UFO on his cell phone from his apartment in Suffolk, Virginia. It was an orb of light, just a big ball of light. It wasn't moving, it was solid white. The other was directly across the street from it, up 300 feet above the ground, and was changing colors very rapidly, he said. He alleged that it wasn't until after he published the footage online that things truly became strange. I woke up from a nap by the sound of someone trying to enter my apartment, and I said, "Who is it?" There was no answer. You could see the doorknob moving and scratching at the door. The firearm, it was on my table, and my thought was to get up and check. Despite the urge to get up, Terrell was paralyzed and only able to move his eyes. Suddenly, he heard a voice through the door tell him, "You don't need that weapon, we won't harm." He then began to experience missing hours as well, and he was incapable of accounting for 4 waking hours during a span of 2 nights. I was in a room and I saw a woman who did not have complete human features. She had the typical black eyes that you hear about, she had an elongated skull, and that startled me. The next memory I have is me standing on my balcony waving at this cylinder-shaped ship, he said. Number 7. Charles Hickson and Calvin Parker. The Pascagoula abduction was an UFO sighting and alien abduction in 1973, in which Charles Hickson and Calvin Parker claimed they were abducted by aliens while fishing in Mississippi. On the evening of October 11, 1973, 42-year-old Charles Hickson and 19-year-old Calvin Parker told the Jackson County, Mississippi Sheriff's Office that they were fishing off a pier on the west bank of the river when they heard a whirling whiz sound, saw 2 flashing blue lights, and observed an oval-shaped object 30 to 40 feet across 8 to 10 feet high. They claimed that they were conscious but paralyzed, while 3 creatures with robotic slit mouths and crab-like pincers took them aboard the object and subjected them to an examination. Number 6. Thomas Reed. On September 1st, 1969, Thomas Reed and his family in Berkshire County, Massachusetts saw a UFO. In the car with his mother, brother, and grandmother that night, the family noticed a group of glowing orbs dash out of the roadside trees. It came to a stop off the right side of the road, Thomas said. Everything got really calm. It was like being in the middle of a hurricane. It was just like dead silent. Then there was an eruption of crickets and frogs, and it got really loud, and that was it. Then the family suddenly found itself back in the car, but they had inexplicably lost 2 hours of memory. Stranger still, Thomas's mother and grandmother had somehow switched car seats. He said over time the family regained some memory of the incident, including having been to a hangar-like facility with other people. We encountered something, it was definitely not of this world. The hangar thing we were in was huge, it was larger than a football field. The hallway we had seen was circular with a Y configuration, almost to control the flow of traffic, and this one room had a bowed-in wall that was round, he said.
And we're going to start things off with Point Dume underwater base. So off the coast of Point Dume in Malibu, there seems to be this mysterious structure lying about 6 miles underwater. Images captured on Google Earth show an oval-shaped object resting on the seabed floor. Looks like it has a large flat top and what seems to be pillars or columns. Looking at it, it definitely looks like the entrance to something. It sits about 2,000 feet beneath the ocean surface, spanning nearly 3 miles in width, and some speculate that it could be more than just a naturally formed structure. And yes, some even think it could be an underwater alien base. Jimmy Church, who hosts a California-based radio show called Fade to Black, was pretty excited about the images, stating, "My first impression was that it was Greek. It looked artificial and didn't look natural. When you're looking at it from above, it's a nearly perfect oval shape. In the natural surroundings, nothing is symmetrical. Everything is eroded and covered in rocks and sloping and peaking. And right here, for 2 miles, it is a perfect oval with a black separation or outline to it. It just stands out that it has to be some type of roof. It's not unlike a domed stadium or a covered indoor racetrack or an Olympic arena. It's got that feel to it. It looks like a perfect oval man-made structure sitting on a construction site." Next up, we have the Solomon Islands UFOs. There have been some very strange things said to go on here. for hundreds and hundreds of years, and not only have locals claimed to see strange lights in the sky, but also coming up from under the water as well, which has led to a pretty intense theory that there could be an underwater alien base there. There have always been local legends of monstrous giants on the islands, 10-foot tall, hairy creatures with flat noses and glowing red eyes. That, combined with the reports of strange lights in the sky, moving with incredible speed and agility, could mean there may be some kind of connection here. You see, some of these lights and strange flying objects have been seen descending down into the trees of the Guadalcanal or rising up from the ocean and zipping around before diving back down. There are also legends that these giants that are said to live on the island move around through subterranean tunnels. So some speculate that beneath the surface of the ocean is this hidden structure where extraterrestrial beings may be conducting their activities. Next up, we have High Brazil, a small mythological island off the coast of Ireland. According to Celtic folklore, this island is said to lie off the west coast of the country, appearing only every 7 years, usually surrounded by mist. The island is often described as a paradise with advanced technology and a society living in total harmony with nature. Sailors and explorers have reported spotting the island for centuries, claiming to have seen strange creatures and these glowing godlike beings there. Maps from the 14th to the 19th centuries often included High Brazil, but its exact location was always a bit of a mystery. Now, of course, it sounds like complete folklore, which Celtic culture is absolutely full of, but what if there's something else going on here? Well, some have suggested that the islands appearing and disappearing could have an extraterrestrial connection. The idea is that aliens could be using advanced cloaking technology or have a hidden base on or beneath the island, and the mysterious creatures that some sailors claimed to have seen on the island do sound like they could be alien-like, but it's still a total mystery as to what they'd be doing over there. Next up on the list, we have strange skulls that were found in an underwater cave in Mexico. So in 2012, divers were exploring a cenote in the Yucatan Peninsula where they came across two chambers full of human bones, and some of these bones were human skulls, but there was something off about them. They were elongated. Now, the ancient Maya were said to have performed human sacrifices in the area, and skull deformation was also practiced in various parts of Mexico way back when. There are theories as to why, but nothing entirely concrete. One idea is that high-ranking members of society had elongated skulls. Some say that people's skulls were elongated just to differentiate certain groups from one another, but there's also the theory that these skulls never belonged to human beings at all. Pretty common knowledge, of course, that there are tons of conspiracy theories surrounding the ancient Maya, including the presence of extraterrestrials that may have helped them construct all their intricate advanced cities. So could these skulls have belonged to these supposed alien beings? It's possible. Next up, we have the Lake Baikal incident. So this lake in southern Siberia is the world's largest freshwater lake by volume. It's incredibly deep, and there are some pretty eerie stories about it. First of all, there's all the mysterious lights that are reported, not just hovering or flying above it, but also coming from the depths of the water. And there's a very creepy story that was supposedly an attempted cover-up by the Russian government. So in 1982, a team of Navy divers were doing a routine diving exercise in the lake when a number of them started spotting something pretty disturbing. There were all these figures deep under the water. They were tall and slender, well over 6 feet tall, and wearing what looked to be silver suits. Those suits could have also been silvery scales. They also had large, circular, glowing, unblinking eyes. The creatures began chasing after the divers, or swimming after them, rather, and the divers panicked and then swam back up to the surface, and they reported what they'd seen to their superiors, but that's where the story ends. The existence of the strange creatures has never been confirmed or denied.
Starting off this list, in our number 10 spot, we have the 1976 Tehran incident. The 1976 Tehran UFO incident is a notable case in UFOlogy that took place on September 19, 1976. The incident involved a luminous object that was observed hovering over the city by two F-4 Phantom II jet interceptors of the Iranian Air Force. The object was detected on radar and appeared to be capable of jamming the communication systems of the jets. The pilots reported that they saw a brightly lit diamond-shaped object that emitted a green light, and they attempted to engage it with missiles. However, the object evaded their attempts and quickly disappeared. At a pilots conference in 2007, one of the pilots in this incident, Parvez Jafari, said he attempted to fire at the UFO, but something strange was preventing him from doing so. He said, quote, "My weapons jammed and my radio communications garbled." The incident was investigated by the Iranian government and the US Defense Intelligence Agency, and it has been the subject of much speculation and debate among UFO enthusiasts. Some argue that the incident was evidence of extraterrestrial activity, while others suggest it may have been a secret military experiment or some kind of atmospheric phenomenon. Despite the official investigation, the incident remains unresolved and its true nature remains a mystery. In our number 9 spot today, we have the McMinnville UFO photographs. The McMinnville UFO photographs are a series of 2 photographs taken by Paul and Evelyn Trent on May 11, 1950 in McMinnville, Oregon. The photos depict a metallic disc-shaped object in the sky with trees and buildings visible in the foreground. The Trents claimed that they saw the object hovering in the sky and were able to capture it on camera. The photographs quickly gained widespread attention and were widely circulated in newspapers and magazines, and they were also examined by several experts, including the US Air Force, which conducted an investigation known as Project Blue Book. Famous project here on Most Amazing Top 10. The Trents maintained that the photographs were genuine and that they had not tampered with them in any way. However, some skeptics have suggested that the photographs may have been hoaxed or that the objects in the photographs were just a common object. Despite the controversy surrounding the photographs, however, they remain one of the most famous and well-known UFO sightings in history. The photographs have been the subject of numerous articles, books, and documentaries, and have inspired countless discussions and debates about the existence of UFOs and extraterrestrial life. In our number 8 spot today, we have the USS Nimitz Tic Tac UFO incident. This UFO sighting comes from 2004. On November 14th of that year, the USS Princeton noticed an unknown aircraft of some sort that was about 100 miles off of the coast of San Diego. For 2 weeks prior to this, the crew had been tracking a strange flying object that would start out at about 80,000 feet before extremely quickly dropping to hover right above the Pacific Ocean. Commander David Fravor and Lieutenant Commander Jim Slate went over in 2 fighter jets, and when they arrived, they saw what at first appeared to be churning water while there was an oval shape just below the surface. After this, the white oval-shaped object appeared above the water, but it had no markings on it. Like no windows, nothing that would indicate an engine, no wings, and the infrared monitors on the jets didn't pick up any sort of exhaust. The commander and lieutenant commander tried to intercept this strange aircraft, but it very quickly flew away and reappeared on the monitor 60 miles away. And when I say quickly, I mean it was moving at 3 times the speed of sound and over twice the speed of the fighter jets. So, faster than any kind of technology we currently have. We still don't know exactly what it was, but it certainly was beyond our current capabilities. In our number 7 spot today, we have the Aguadilla Airport incident. The Aguadilla Airport UFO incident occurred on April 25, 2013, when a strange object was spotted hovering above the Rafael Hernandez Airport in Aguadilla, Puerto Rico. The object was initially detected by radar and later confirmed by security cameras as a glowing, unidentified object that appeared to be traveling at a low altitude. The object was described as being around 4 to 5 feet in length, and it moved very quickly and very erratically. It was also observed to emit a bright white light and appeared to be changing shape. The incident attracted widespread attention and was investigated by several government agencies, including the Federal Aviation Administration and the Department of Homeland Security. The object was ultimately classified as an unidentified flying object, or UFO, and no explanation was given for its presence in the area. It is even said that a US Customs and Border Protection aircraft actually captured infrared video of the incident that was given to the Scientific Coalition for UFOlogy by a whistleblower. This video is said to show the UFO traveling at super low altitudes, sometimes lower than the treetops, but at speeds close to 100 miles per hour. The Aguadilla Airport UFO incident is considered one of the most significant UFO sightings in recent history due to the high level of documentation and the involvement of government agencies. It continues to be a topic of discussion and speculation among UFO enthusiasts and researchers, and has contributed to ongoing efforts to uncover the truth about the nature and origin of UFO sightings around the world. In our number 6 spot today, we have the Project Blue Book sighting. Air Force Lieutenant Colonel Richard French was once tasked with being an investigator for Project Blue Book, which was the name used to describe a study of UFOs conducted by the United States Air Force from March 1952 to December 17, 1969, when the project was terminated. Okay, we talk about Project Blue Book a lot. You gotta know what it is. While his job was meant to be to investigate and essentially debunk UFO sightings, later in life he took to Congress to stand up and explain his own UFO encounter that he was never able to explain away. The moment that truly stuck with him all of these years took place back in 1952 when he was sent off to Newfoundland after there were reports of a UFO that had crashed off of the coast of St. John's. As he arrived to the scene, there were at least 100 people who all stood and stared into the water, and as he was able to follow their gaze and see what they were all looking at, he couldn't quite believe his eyes. He recalled the water being quite clear, and under it you could see 2 circular crafts, each one approximately 18 feet in diameter. He said that they were both floating just below the surface of the water, no more than 20 feet from the shore, and not only this, but he could also see 2 beings with the crafts. He said, quote, "The first thing I saw was the UFOs, and it was apparent to me that they were doing something to the craft, and I couldn't really tell what because they were on the bottom side of it and not visible to me except when they would occasionally get over to the side where I could see them." He claims he watched on as the beings worked on the craft until one of them raised out of the water and disappeared, but not before accelerating to speeds in the neighborhood of 2,500 to 3,000 miles per hour. In our number 5 spot today, we have the Coyne-Mansfield helicopter incident. The Coyne-Mansfield helicopter UFO incident occurred on October 18, 1973, when 4 members of the Ohio Army National Guard were flying in a helicopter over Mansfield, Ohio. Suddenly, they encountered a large metallic disc-shaped object that was hovering in the sky. The object began to move towards the helicopter, causing the crew to take evasive maneuvers. Despite their efforts, the object continued to follow them, eventually passing overhead and disappearing into the distance. The crew reported the incident to their superiors, and an investigation was launched by the military and the Federal Aviation Administration. The incident received significant media attention, and it remains one of the most compelling UFO sightings on record. What makes this incident particularly intriguing is the credibility of the witnesses. The crew were all experienced pilots with military training, and their account of the incident was corroborated by radar data and other witnesses on the ground. Despite extensive investigations, no satisfactory explanation has ever been offered for what they saw that day. In our number 4 spot today, we have Apollo 11. So we can sit here on Earth all day and talk about the potential for alien life and UFOs, but who would know more than the people who have actually been to space, which are of course astronauts. Definitely on the list of coolest and scariest jobs in the world. There haven't been a ton of people who have had the unbelievable privilege of experiencing space firsthand, but there are even less of them who have claimed to see something that seems completely unexplainable. People who have claimed these sorts of things include Edgar Mitchell, Catherine Coleman, and Dr. Brian O'Leary. The very interesting part about many of these claims is that they also include some sort of government cover-up as well with their claims. There was also Buzz Aldrin, who spoke about his Apollo 11 experience, and he detailed the crew seeing something flying alongside them, and at first they believed it was the final stage of a detached rocket, but then Mission Control confirmed that it was actually 6,000 miles away from them, leaving them with no answers on what the flying object could be. I can't imagine going to space at all, let alone encountering a UFO flying right beside you. Also, I can't believe that I hadn't heard of that story before, because to me, that sounds like full-blown alien contact. In our number 3 spot today, we have the Go Faster video. In 2017, after the existence of the Advanced Aviation Threat Identification Program became more well known, a video was released of an encounter between an FA-18 Super Hornet and some sort of unidentified flying object. This video was the third in a series of 3 videos, and there weren't a ton of details released about exactly what happened during this encounter. Using the Raytheon Advanced Targeting Forward-Looking Infrared Pod, they were able to capture an extremely fast-moving white oval that was around 45 feet long. The oval had no wings and didn't appear to have any kind of exhaust either. They were tracking the UFO at an altitude of 25,000 feet just above the Atlantic Ocean, and then they were shocked as the craft rotated on its axis and flew away. There was no explanation released with the footage because it truly is unbelievable and currently unexplainable. In our number 2 spot today, we have the Delphos ring incident. The Delphos ring UFO incident occurred on November 2nd, 1971 in Delphos, Kansas, when a family witnessed a strange object hovering over their farm. The UFO emitted a bright light that illuminated the surrounding area and left a glowing ring in the ground after it disappeared. The family reported the incident to the local sheriff, who took a sample of the ring for analysis. Investigations were conducted by several experts, including the Aerial Phenomena Research Organization, who collected soil samples and found that the ring was caused by the removal of topsoil, which had been exposed to a high amount of heat. Additionally, a high level of radiation was also detected at the site. The incident received widespread media coverage and sparked debates about the existence of extraterrestrial life and the possibility of alien visitation. Some skeptics argued that the incident could have been caused by natural phenomena or a hoax, but the witnesses maintained that they saw a genuine UFO. Despite the years of investigation, it's been no conclusive explanation for the incident has been found, leaving the mystery of the Delphos ring UFO unsolved. In our number 1 spot today, we have the Shag Harbour incident. This incident took place on October 4th, 1967, when an unknown object crashed into the water near Shag Harbour, which is a tiny town in Nova Scotia. There were at least 11 people who witnessed this object as it crashed, and many people claimed to have heard a whistling sound followed by a loud bang when the crash took place. The witnesses that claimed to have seen the UFO were all doing a bunch of different things at the time. One couple was just sitting out on their porch, but the 2 witnesses that really get me are a flight pilot and a ship captain. On Air Canada Flight 305, First Officer Robert Ralph pointed out to Captain Pierre Charbonneau that there was something strange out the left side of the aircraft. They reported an object tracking along on a parallel course a few miles away and described it as a brilliantly lit rectangular object with a string of smaller lights trailing it. Shortly after they first noticed it, there was a large but silent explosion near the unknown object, and then 2 minutes later there was a second explosion, but this one faded to a blue cloud. As for the ship captain, Captain Leo Howard Mercy, he saw 4 blips on his Decca radar that were totally stationary. This led to him looking up to the sky, and this is when he saw 4 bright objects sitting in a rectangular formation about 28 kilometers from the vessel's window. He wasn't the only one who saw it on board either. The entire crew of nearly 20 fishermen stood on deck and watched. A man named Laurie Wickens was another one of the witnesses, and he and some friends ended up calling the RCMP, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, because they saw a huge object floating in the Atlantic Ocean about 1,000 feet offshore. This is all super weird, and not only the RCMP but also the Royal Canadian Navy and the Royal Canadian Air Force became involved in the investigation, but nothing was ever recovered or found. It was also revealed that all commercial, private, and military aircrafts along the eastern seaboard were accounted for, so what could have all those witnesses seen? Since they never officially identified what it was, in the official Government of Canada documents, it is listed as a UFO.
Next up, we have underwater alien bases in Alaska. So claims of alleged alien bases lurking beneath the waters off the coast of Alaska have been around for quite a while, but in recent years the idea of them has become more of a popular thing, mostly thanks to Ancient Aliens. Thank you, Ancient Aliens. But apparently there are even eyewitness accounts dating back several decades which have been mostly undisclosed until recently. UFOologists and UFO enthusiasts have now been turning their attention to the mysterious activities in the waters of Alaska. One incident dates back to 1945 when crew members of a ship reported spotting an unidentified craft. Researchers, including members of MUFON, or the Mutual UFO Network, which is a non-profit organization that studies reported UFO sightings, they think it's possible that extraterrestrial beings have been constructing bases beneath the ocean's surface, and that's because there are tons of reports of UFO movements over the water. There were also a number of UFO sightings in the 40s that weren't disclosed to the public at the time. These undisclosed reports allegedly provide evidence that there are extraterrestrial entities operating in the waters off the coast of Alaska. This next story comes to us from Reddit, and although what this person saw wasn't technically under the water, it was floating just above it, and it's a pretty fascinating account. The story comes to us from user Keslow, who writes, I used to live in Charleston, South Carolina back around 2006, and I had a job that had me leaving home at about 4 a.m. I lived in a bad part of town near the International Airport Joint Base, so when I left, I did a scan of the area before getting into my car. One morning, I stepped out of my home to do my scan and noticed that there were thin, wispy clouds flowing in off the ocean. Basically, it was a thin fog, about 1,000 to 1,500 feet up, moving like a river. I also noticed at this point that there were two effing moons. One is obscured by the thin clouds, our real moon, and the other is most definitely under the clouds. It was a sphere of glowing white light. It made no sound and did not move. After about 2 minutes, it bolted eastward towards the ocean. The glowing light faded quickly right as it took off as well. I've seen planes move near the speed of sound, and this thing went from 0 to like 3,000 miles per hour instantly. No acceleration. Much faster than the speed of sound with no sonic boom. I hope I don't see it again, especially on the water. I always wondered if it bolted because they saw me watching them. Next up, we have the strange reports of a large disc-like object being spotted in the Indian Ocean. Apparently, as far back as 1873, ships sailing the Indian Ocean from the Persian Gulf to the South China Sea have reported spotting a massive mile-wide disc passing beneath their boats, accompanied by large, rotating lights. One of the earliest documented sightings happened on March 23rd of 1873, when the ship Adelaide traversed the South China Sea. Witnesses reported floating over a huge, glowing circular object beneath the ocean's surface. On May 15th, 1879, the crew of the HMS Vulture described the sighting of two large Ferris wheels spinning in opposite directions. The spokes of these wheels were reported to be 25 feet wide, with 100 feet of space between them. There have been tons of these reports in various locations in the Indian Ocean, over the years. On April 4th, 1901, for example, in the Persian Gulf, the crew of the SS Kilwa claimed to see rays of light emanating from an underwater disc-like object. And even in 1943, in the Persian Gulf, a sailor named Matthew Mangle reported a huge glowing disc beneath the water's surface, pacing his ship. And these are just a handful of examples. And coming in at second place is the Michigan Stonehenge. So in 2007, a professor of underwater archaeology, Mark Hawley, made a pretty incredible discovery. It was this arrangement of stones lying on the lake bed, looking a lot like Stonehenge in England. The stones are laid out in a circular pattern, and some even appear to be arranged in a line. They're about 40 feet below the surface of the lake. So what was the purpose of this formation? Could it be the remnants of an ancient civilization? Could extraterrestrials have constructed it thousands of years ago? They look like they've been placed in a pretty precise pattern. Doesn't look to be natural forming to me. And of course, there's also a rock with a mastodon carved into it. Hard to believe something like that would be created naturally. What's also really fascinating is that these stones are believed to be about 9,000 years old, predating Stonehenge by about 4,000 years. And finally, it's only natural that we finish things off with what has to be the most famous strange object discovered deep beneath the sea, the Baltic Sea anomaly. So back in the summer of 2011, a team of Swedish treasure hunters didn't come across any treasure in terms of monetary gain anyway, but they did find something pretty cool, a sonar image that seems to show a strange UFO-like object on the sea floor. Peter Lindbergh, the leader of the treasure hunting team, would be so awesome just to be able to say you're the leader of a treasure hunting team. I could say that and I'd just be digging through my backyard finding nothing. But this guy actually goes out on boats and submarines and does it. I didn't get that job. Anyway, he's the leader of Ocean X and was pretty astonished by what he had found, saying the object definitely didn't look like a natural formation. And even though a number of researchers have come out and said it probably is a natural formation, I still get excited looking at this thing. I don't know, I'm just not entirely convinced. I'm on the fence about this one. But what do you guys think? Alien craft, ancient artifact, just some mundane natural formation? Let us know down in them comments.
Number 5, Whitley Strieber. Whitley Strieber had written fiction for more than 40 years, and he said his writing streak was interrupted one night in the late 80s by an alien abduction in upstate New York. The alleged incident occurred on the night of December 26, 1985, as Whitley slept alone in his cabin in the woods. Woken by a strange noise, he saw a small non-human entity approaching his bed. Then suddenly it was morning. According to him, beings that he has since referred to as visitors entered his home and abducted him. Now, he also detailed another alien encounter that he claims took place in Toronto. Asleep in his Delta Chelsea hotel room in the middle of the night on June 6, 1998, Whitley claimed to have been visited by another mysterious stranger. I got up to open the door thinking it was a room service waiter. It was not. It was a man I described as about 5.5 feet tall, older looking, like someone in his 70s. He wore dark-colored clothing, a turtleneck, and charcoal slacks. He claimed the visitor stood motionless by the window for nearly an hour, expounding on the dangers of creating an intelligence more involved than its creator. He said it was the most extraordinary conversation I've ever had in my life. Number 4. Frederick Valentich. On October 21, 1978, Australian pilot Frederick Valentich disappeared into thin air. At 7:06 p.m., while at 4,500 feet, after departing, he reported that an unidentified craft was following him. Melbourne Flight Service insisted that there was no traffic near him, but the pilot was adamant. He explained that it had 4 bright lights and suddenly passed 1,000 feet above him at a remarkable speed. For 5 straight minutes, Frederick described its movements and shiny metallic exterior. Suddenly, he experienced engine trouble and said the aircraft was hovering and it's not an aircraft. Then they never heard from him again. The last sound radio officials heard was a metallic scraping sound. Now, authorities presumed that he had crashed, but a later search of the area yielded nothing. In 2014, a UFO action group in Victoria alleged that a farmer observed a UFO nearly 90 feet in length hovering above his farm on the morning following Frederick's disappearance. The farmer also claimed that the pilot's plane was stuck to the UFO, leaking oil. But again, Frederick and the plane have never been found. Ultimately, a few possibilities regarding the disappearance of Frederick exist: that he crashed and his remains were never covered, that he purposely disappeared, or, of course, he was abducted by aliens. Number 3. Audrey and Debbie Hewins. Twins Audrey and Debbie Hewins said they were abducted by aliens. I was probably about 5 years old or so, said Audrey, and a bright blue light would come into the room and the door would open, and there would be like a foggy kind of misty blue light just shining through the whole house, and these 2 figures would come in. We have been up in crafts and seen our house from above. They're very good at mind erasing, or whatever you want to call it. They'll leave you with bits and pieces of things that you can remember. Debbie added, I remember one time being on a spaceship and standing there on the spaceship and the floor and the walls disappeared. They started doing all kinds of experiments on us when we were 12. While she was initially hesitant to come forward, Audrey claimed that after a non-human entity saved her life from drowning in the ocean, she was inspired to dedicate her life to openly discussing her alien abduction experiences. Number 2. Travis Walton. On November 5th, 1975, Travis Walton was abducted by aliens, and he didn't return for 5 whole days. Travis's abduction began after working at the Site Graves National Forest near Heber, Arizona. Travis and a 6-man group of loggers were returning home when they allegedly spotted a shiny disc spanning 40 feet in diameter hovering in the sky above them. He said it was a metallic glowing disc making some very strange sounds. The closer I got to it, the more scared we all got, and they were swearing at me to get away from there, and when I got up close, it suddenly got louder and started to move. Travis then claimed that non-human beings abducted him and experimented on him until he fought them off. But as the being supposedly poked and prodded at him on a kind of table, 5 days elapsed on Earth where Walton was officially declared missing. I became conscious inside the craft, and I believe I was in the hospital. I was in a lot of pain, and as I became more conscious, I looked around and saw alien beings, and I just panicked. They were much smaller than me, and I think that's the reason why they gave up. Once they found out they couldn't control me, they split. Now, later research conducted at the site of Travis's abduction showed an unusual growth rate in the trees where the craft had allegedly hovered. The trees near the site were found to be producing wood fiber at a rate of 36 times greater than they had been in the decades before. And coming in number 1 is Dr. Albert Bender. One of the most famous instances of alien invasion was the case of Dr. Albert Bender. Albert was a very intelligent researcher with an interest in aliens and UFOs, and even founded the International Flying Saucer Bureau. It was successful as he began to gather lots of alleged evidence related to UFOs, but soon he began seeing strange men watching him around his town, reportedly with glowing eyes. Then one night in 1953, 3 men in black showed up to his house. The mysterious men looked at first to be government agents, but he soon discovered they were something from a completely different realm. The men made it clear to Albert that he was to immediately stop all UFO research and investigation and to cease any publishing. They then confiscated most of his findings before threatening him once more and vanishing. Then he had a second encounter where he was visited by 3 shadowy figures. They did not touch the floor but hovered above it, and they told him that their human appearance was an illusion and that whatever information he told people about their visitation would not be believed. They supposedly told him that they capture people from Earth and use their bodies to disguise themselves. Now, due to all this, Albert was so afraid of the experience that he immediately halted all publishings, quit ufology, and turned into a completely different man. Years later, he published a book about his experience with the men in black and went on to manage a motel and never touched extraterrestrial research ever again. Number 5. October 11th, 1973. October 11th was quite the night for Ohio residents as there were many UFOs spotted. In Dayton, at least 15 sightings were reported. Many witnesses reported seeing objects covered with red, green, and blue lights hovering over treetops in the area. A Montgomery County Sheriff's deputy reported seeing an oblong object covered with lights that appeared stationary in the sky at treetop level for several minutes until he tried to shine his cruiser's spotlight on it. It then zoomed towards him and then shot straight up in the sky. Then in Troy, according to an article in the Columbus Dispatch from October 12, 1973, titled UFO Reports Proceed Boom, on October 11th, Troy patrolman Early Thomas and about 100 Troy residents said they watched a hovering red, green, and white object move across the southeastern sky. Now, just to note, this happens to be the direction of Wright-Patterson. About 15 minutes later, law enforcement agencies in Miami, Champaign, and Logan counties received hundreds of telephone calls after a sonic boom was heard. They received more calls when a second sonic boom was heard just after midnight, and it seems like the aliens had something special planned for that day to me. Number 4. Trumbull County UFO Incident. Featured on the History Channel and numerous UFO documentaries, the Trumbull County UFO incident in northeast Ohio is exceptional because it was witnessed by numerous police officers and a 911 dispatcher, all of whom were being recorded as they spoke back and forth about the strange events unfolding the evening of December 14th, 1994. It was also seen by many members of the public as well. Now, around midnight, Trumbull County 911 began receiving calls from residents about strange low-flying lights in the sky. The dispatcher sent out Liberty Townsend police officers to investigate. One of them was Sergeant Toby Melrose, who saw a light. He got out of his car and looked up to see what he described as a giant circular-shaped object and intensely bright in the center section. It made no sound at all. The object was there for about 30 seconds before moving away. Shaken, Sergeant Melrose decided to chase the object, as did many other police officers in the area. At least 14 law enforcement officers saw the object that night, with all of them discussing it openly on their radios. Number 3. 1973. There were many UFO sightings in 1973 in Ohio and its surrounding states. For example, in Columbus on September 30th, a Franklin County man claims to have discovered a landing site near his home after seeing a strange object in the sky. Weeds at the alleged site are crushed to the ground in a semi-oval area 20 by 30 feet wide. The man says the object whooped down in a zigzag pattern and dropped below the trees. There are several dozen sightings of strange objects in the sky reported in the area that night. Then in Middletown on October 7th, a giant orange-colored cigar-shaped object with 5 discs following it and making no sound is reported flying over the city at 10 p.m. Many people see it, and Wright-Patterson receives numerous calls. Now, these are just 2 examples of that year, but there are many, many more. Number 2. Circleville. On On August 26, 2022, Pete Hartinger said UFOs were spotted in the area. An expert on the topic who has seen a UFO with his own eyes, Pete said several people reported seeing UFOs between 9 p.m. and 11 p.m., including a man who saw something in the sky as he was traveling on US 23 north of Circleville. He saw strange lights, and going on down, he saw some more strange lights. He knows some other people who saw them too, he said. The man said it wasn't right the way the lights were acting. The lights came down, hit the ground, and went back up, so forget about them being flares. Pete said the man, who wishes to remain anonymous, reported what he saw to the Roundtown UFO Society, a local group dedicated to studying these matters. Anybody who has seen strange, mysterious lights that have been in the sky, please let us know, he said. He said at least half a dozen people saw the lights. One person said they saw orange lights over the fairgrounds, he said, and another person said he saw some military aircraft coming in after he saw those lights. Were they coming in to investigate, or what? Since 1947, there have been several sightings of UFOs in the Circleville area, which is strange. And coming in at number 1 is Ohio is a beacon. According to the Mutual UFO Network of Ohio, MUFON, the state ranks among the top 10 states in UFO reports. Thomas Wortman with the MUFON said, "It's all sorts of things we get. We get the individual who is out walking their dog at night who reports seeing unusual lights that they just can't explain. They see the lights for a few seconds or minutes and they just want an answer." Now, the majority of these reports come from Northeast Ohio, and Thomas says about 80% of what comes in the agency can be explained, but about 20% and up being classified as UFOs. Now, if you're waiting for the government to admit that aliens do exist, don't hold your breath, because the Time reports that the Pentagon isn't going to say that. But my question is, what is so special about Ohio?
On July 11, 1991, Mexico City experienced a total solar eclipse, but as the sky darkened, people down below saw something they'd never been expecting to see. Guillermo Aragon, a television executive, was filming the eclipse from his rooftop when he noticed a strange object hovering above. His footage caught the attention of Jaime Maussan, a well-known Mexican journalist. He described his reaction saying, "When I saw it, I said, oh my god, this is a UFO, a real UFO." 8 days later, Maussan aired the footage in a special broadcast. The response was overwhelming, with the network receiving 40,000 calls at once. Viewers began sending in their own videos too, and at least 7 showed similar objects in the sky. One 19-year-old student named Eric Aguilar described seeing a white dot that transformed into a larger, shining object. Meanwhile, 60 miles away, businessman Luis Lara captured another video of a metallic object. Maussan noted that many of these reports and videos were very similar. It looked like people had spotted the same UFO at different locations. 2 months later, engineer Vicente Sanchez recorded another shiny object during a military air show, describing its undulating movement, and a year after that, a similar object appeared at the same air show, moving against the wind. Since that eclipse, Mexico has just seen thousands of UFO sightings, like this next one. Another one of the most fascinating UFO sightings in Mexico took place on March 5th of 2004, when Mexican Air Force pilots came across a series of mysterious glowing objects over southern Campeche state. They spotted a total of 11 unidentified flying objects and quickly started filming them as they hovered around in their jet. The footage goes on for a long time. You get to see these things clearly gliding across the sky at high speed in this organized formation. This was definitely not your typical flash in the sky kind of sighting. The pilots attempted to follow the objects, but they eventually vanished from sight. Project Sign was an official U.S. government study on UFOs initiated by the United States Air Force in 1948. The project was an early attempt to investigate the growing number of unidentified flying object sightings following World War II. Project Sign was established under Air Force General Nathan Twining, head of the Air Technical Service Command. Its primary goal was to collect and evaluate all available information on UFO sightings. There was a lot of paranoia surrounding UFOs at this time. This was right after World War II, and many thought that these mysterious objects could pose a real risk. On April 27, 1949, the Air Force released a report summarizing what they'd gathered so far. The document indicated that some UFOs seemed to be genuine aircraft, but that there wasn't enough evidence to determine their origin. Most sightings were explained as misidentified objects though, but the report did call for an ongoing investigation. Retired Air Force Captain Edward Edward J. Ruppelt later claimed in his 1956 book, The Report on Unidentified Flying Objects, that Project Sign had produced an estimate of the situation, suggesting an extraterrestrial origin for these UFOs. But General Hoyt Vandenberg, the chief of staff at the Air Force, ended up shutting down the project because of a lack of any proof. Following Project Sign, there was Project Grudge, which took a much more skeptical stance on UFOs. This project just outright dismissed reports as misidentifications, mass hysteria, or hoaxes. It seemed like they had a very clear agenda to discredit witnesses and make the idea of unidentified flying objects and aliens just seem silly to the public. Before Project Sign, there was Majestic 12, or MJ-12, a secretive group that supposedly formed to investigate the Roswell incident in 1947. Allegedly, this group consisted of 12 scientists, military officials, and politicians tasked with examining the alien spacecraft that reportedly crashed in New Mexico. Eyewitnesses claimed the craft carried extraterrestrials, prompting the need for a covert operation that would later lead to the establishment of Area 51. But back to Roswell for a moment. At first, the military actually announced they recovered a flying disc, but they quickly changed their tune, saying it was just a weather balloon. This inconsistency seemed highly suspect, especially as witnesses like rancher Mac Brazel described strange debris and strange-looking, almost non-human bodies being recovered from the scene. Now, interest in MJ-12 began in the late 70s when a letter allegedly from President Truman was leaked, authorizing the creation of this secret organization. Some documents were later found that referenced MJ-12, though the government insists these are fake. But two classified documents in the National Archives do mention MJ-12. Some believe that MJ-12 used advanced alien technology to influence human thoughts or even erase people's memories. It's also believed that MJ-12 was involved in overseeing alien abductions, allowing extraterrestrials to abduct people in exchange for advanced tech, which they reverse engineer at Area 51, which houses alien crafts and possibly even aliens themselves. Project Blue Book was a U.S. Air Force program that investigated UFO sightings from 1952 to 1969. It followed earlier programs, Project Sign and Project Grudge, but Blue Book became the most comprehensive effort to study UFOs. Project Blue Book collected over 12,000 UFO reports. Of these, about 700 stayed classified as unexplained after investigation. The project focused on two main questions. Were UFOs a threat to national security? And were they actually of extraterrestrial origin? The answers to these questions were made less clear to the public than the public would have hoped. One of the most interesting cases investigated by Blue Book was the 1966 Michigan UFO sightings, where a number of people, including police officers, reported seeing strange lights in the sky. The Air Force dismissed the reports at first, but people were so adamant about what they saw that they were forced to reevaluate the incident. In 1967, a panel of scientists reviewed the evidence and ultimately deemed the sightings, quote, not entirely explainable. By the late 60s, the Air Force began to wind down Project Blue Book, saying they just hadn't gathered enough evidence for extraterrestrial life. The project officially ended in December of 1969, with the Air Force releasing a final report that concluded UFOs did not pose a threat and that most sightings could be attributed to misidentified aircraft, balloons, or astronomical phenomena. But to this day, many believe the government cover up evidence of actual extraterrestrial encounters. All that said, I've been your host, James. I'll catch you, yes, you specifically, in the next video.
Want to see more videos like this one? Check out this video next. It's about actual alien evidence that will straight up blow your mind. How is that not all over the news? Click the video now if you want to see more. See you guys in the next video.